It is actually commonly understood that money genuinely does not buy happiness. However, money certainly buys a lot of time and a lot of resources to try and figure out how to be happy. But in this breaking story, and in the U.S. government of Donald J. Trump's second term, money also buys you a lot of other things, a lot of which right now not particularly good when it comes to the Department of Homeland Security and what ICE and Tom Homan are doing. However, it gets even worse when you see this breaking story and what has just occurred with an element of the U.S. government and, one of our neighborly partners in this world known as the folks above us in North America. I'm going to show that story to you in just a few seconds because holy smokes, try to imagine when you see this, if this poor guy I'm going to show you was you and you were not a citizen of the United States, nor even in the United States. But let's understand one of the reasons why this may be occurring because of money and resources. This is what Trump's big, beautiful bill just did on the brass tacks level of cash. This.
ICE gets $45 billion to expand its detention facilities, a lot of those private prisons, and $30 billion for arrest and deportations. The bill also adds tens of billions of dollars for Border Patrol. So just get your head around this. ICE now has more funding than the FBI, DEA, ATF, Marshals, and the Bureau of Prisons combined. That makes it the largest federal law enforcement agency in the history of the United States of America.
And yet, ironically, as they build more detention centers and rack up more people who need due process, which they don't care about, they also are not spending money on judges. And yet, they're certainly firing up the engines literally in this breaking story. This part.
The law spends roughly $170 billion on immigration enforcement. Immigration judges and courts, just $3 billion. So that should make the priorities here clear. And now, increased reports of horrendous conditions, lack of due process, and potential constitutional violations at these very same facilities. Detainees denied medical care, others forced into packed and inhumane conditions for days. All brought to you by the same people who were happy to lie about migrants eating pets as long as they could get their immigration message across.
So what just happened up in the northern part of the United States of America on the Canadian border where the U.S. Coast Guard, and you have to ask yourself, why would you do this? You would only do this out of arrogance, hubris, and no fear or concern for consequences. But U.S. Coast Guard nearly just killed a Canadian citizen for absolutely no apparent reason, nor even within jurisdiction. Take a look at this.
You see, it comes and goes. It's like, stop it.
Edouard Lallemand is still very emotional when he talks about what happened on Sunday evening. Lallemand was out fishing near Venise en Quebec. The water connects to Lake Champlain in the U.S. But Lallemand says he knows for certain he was on the Canadian side.
I'm seeing them. They're coming towards me. And then I know in my heart, I'm in Canada. I said, you can't do nothing to me.
The boat that was approaching, he says, was the U.S. Coast Guard. They asked him to turn off his engine. He complied. They told him he was in U.S. territory.
No, I'm very sorry. I'm in Canada. And I said, I'm polite enough to talk to you guys, but you cannot arrest me. You can't come across the border and pick me up. And they did.
Lallemand says he started his engine and tried to make his way further into Canada, but he says the Coast Guard followed and tried pushing him into the U.S. Eventually, his boat capsized. Lallemand was in the water and says he was drowning.
You know what they're doing? They're tying to my boat to their boat. They're not even taking care of me. Not at all. I'm the one that told them. The third time I went down, coming out with water in my mouth, spitting it out, I said, throw me a buoy.
He says he was handcuffed on the U.S. Coast Guard boat and eventually turned over to Border Patrol. He was detained and placed in a holding cell without a proper explanation, he says.
I said, are you arresting me? No, sir, you're detained. I said, detained for what? I said, you aggressed me. I didn't do nothing to you guys. I didn't even hit you guys.
In a statement to CTV News, the U.S. Coast Guard says the operator was informed that he was in U.S. Customs waters, While the Coast Guard's 29-foot response boat was alongside the vessel, the operator put the vessel in motion and ignored commands to maintain course and speed for boarding purposes. The vessel then made an abrupt turn and struck the port bow of the Coast Guard. They go on to say that Lalleman's boat capsized and he ended up in the water, but the Coast Guard promptly recovered him. He was eventually transferred to U.S. Border Patrol custody, and the Coast Guard says the actions of the operator of the Canadian vessel are currently under investigation.
We treat our pets better than they treated him.
After hours in a cell, Lallemand was released.
When I saw him coming from the Canadian Customs, and he was flabbergasted. I mean, I've never seen him like that. We've been together for a very long time. He's like a beaten man.
He says he was injured, but he just wants an apology from the U.S. Coast Guard, and he's speaking out as a warning to other Canadians.
I want the people to know and to beware. Stay away from the border, even if it's 500, 600 feet away from there.
Now just sit back for a second, regardless of party, and imagine if that was your dad, your granddad, your brother, just somebody who does what he does for a living, knows where international water lines are, isn't in the U.S., much less what we know has gone on with the discord between Trump and the Canadian government and the new Canadian PM, etc., and the Canadian people. Literally standing across the river on the other side on No King's Day, supporting the U.S. in our disdain for Donald Trump. And yet the Coast Guard has not only the audacity and the arrogance to cross into Canadian waters and do this to a Canadian citizen, but capsize his boat and nearly drown the guy? What in the world has happened to us? And these are people who were paid employees of an arm of the U.S. government. What I'm sharing with everybody here goes far even beyond due process and the Coast Guard. What is going to happen in the course of the next year and a half or two is how much tourism is going to drop in the U.S. and how many businesses are going to go out of business. Not good for business, go out, because of not the policy or the concept of homeland security or illegal immigration, but of how you're going about doing it. Unbelievable. You guys, stay frosty.